They say peace and quiet is the reason people move out to the country. That's exactly why I bought my ranch. Acres of land, no nosy neighbors, and definitely no one telling me how tall my grass should be or what color my mailbox has to be. Just me, my horses, and open space. I worked hard for it, too. Years on the job, saving every penny. So, when I finally got the place, I thought I was done with drama. Turns out, drama had just moved in next door. It all started one warm morning. I was fixing the fencing on the north side of the property when I heard shouting. At first, I thought maybe one of my ranch hands was yelling for help, so I dropped my tools and rushed over. But no, it wasn't that. It was my new neighbor, someone I hadn't met yet, standing on the other side of the fence, arms crossed, sunglasses too big for her face, barking about zoning laws or some nonsense like that. Right away, I knew the type. She didn't start with hello. She started with demands. "You can't have livestock this close to my house," she yelled, even though her house wasn't even visible from my pasture. "This is against HOA rules," she snapped. I let her go on for a minute, just to see how deep she'd dig herself. Then I calmly said, "Ma'am, this property isn't part of the HOA. Never has been. You'd think that would end it." "Nope." She looked me up and down like I was some clueless hick and said, "Well, I'm on the board, and I can tell you this isn't acceptable." I smiled, not because it was funny, but because I knew exactly where this was heading, and she had no idea who she was dealing with. Now, I don't like throwing my badge around. I keep my work and home life separate. My ranch is where I relax. But the problem is, some people can't leave others alone. She kept showing up on my land, pointing her phone at me, recording everything. "This'll go straight to the HOA," she'd say. I'd remind her every time calmly that she had no authority here. Still, she acted like I was some lawless squatter and she was saving the neighborhood from ruin. A few days later, I noticed signs along the property line. Restricted area. Subject to HOA oversight. Printed on bright red paper, like it was some kind of warning. All fake, of course. She must have made them at home. Thinking I'd be intimidated, I just shook my head and pulled them down. But she didn't stop. If anything, she doubled down. One afternoon, I caught her standing on my front steps, peeking in the windows. I walked up slowly and said, "Can I help you?" She jumped like she'd seen a ghost. "I'm documenting violations," she claimed. I told her she stepped 1 foot further, it'd be trespassing. "You wouldn't dare," she said, like she thought I was bluffing. Again, I just smiled. See, some people think yelling louder makes them right. Others think threatening legal action will scare folks into backing down. But when you spend your life working the land and keeping your community safe, you learn how to spot trouble from a mile away. And this woman, she wasn't going to stop until she got the attention she thought she deserved. That attention came sooner than she expected. It was early evening when it happened. I'd just come in for dinner. Boots off, plate in hand, when the call came through. Dispatch. 911 call. Suspicious activity at a rural property. Possible illegal animals, unlicensed fencing, fire hazard. The report said, my ranch's address. I blinked. Part of me almost laughed. She'd really done it. She'd actually called 911. I tossed my plate on the counter, laced my boots back up, and radioed in, "I'll take it," I said. The voice on the other end didn't question it. I knew this was going to be one for the books. I got in my cruiser and started the short drive down the dirt road. My lights weren't on. No siren. Just a quiet roll through the countryside as the sun dipped low. I wasn't mad. I wasn't even annoyed. I was focused. Focused on what I'd find when I pulled up to my own gate and saw her standing there, arms flailing, talking a mile a minute to the deputy who'd just arrived. She had no clue what was about to happen next. When I pulled up to the gate, she didn't even notice me at first. She was too busy pacing, pointing at the barn, waving her phone around like it was a badge. The poor deputy standing with her looked like he didn't know whether to take notes or take cover. I stepped out of my cruiser, adjusted my belt, and walked up slowly. She turned around mid-rant and froze. Her face twisted into something between confusion and panic. What are you doing here? She asked. I didn't answer right away. I just looked at her. She looked back at my uniform, my badge, my car behind me. Then her eyes widened like someone had just turned the lights on. You're the sheriff? She stammered. Yes, ma'am. I said, calm as ever. And you made a 911 call about my property. She took a step back. I didn't know. I didn't realize you were. I thought. Her voice trailed off. The deputy beside her glanced at me, clearly trying to read the situation. I gave him a quick nod, letting him know I had it under control. Karen, that's what people like her are called now, right? Try to recover. Well, this is still a serious issue, she snapped. There are code violations all over. The smell, the animals, the fencing, it's not safe. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I simply said, Ma'am, this ranch is fully permitted. You're not part of the governing jurisdiction. And more importantly, you are now trespassing on private property. She blinked. I am not trespassing. I'm investigating. I let that hang in the air for a moment. Then I pulled out my phone and tapped through a few photos, security camera footage, clear as day, showing her on my porch, trying the doorknob, walking around the bar with her phone up, crossing over property line again and again. You've entered this property without permission multiple times, I said. And today, you called 911 under false pretenses. That's abuse of emergency services. She looked stunned. I didn't lie. I thought something was wrong. Thinking something is wrong doesn't give you the right to waste emergency resources or invade private land. I said, still steady, still professional. And you've been told before that this land isn't under HOA control. At that point, she tried to switch tactics. Well, maybe you're hiding something, she muttered. That barn, what's in there? What you try and keep secret? I almost laughed. Almost. Would you like to see what's in there? I asked. She hesitated, then said yes, probably thinking I backed down. So I walked her and the deputy to the barn, unlocked the door, and swung it open wide. Inside were feed supplies, saddles, tools, and two of my older horses munching hay, tails swishing lazily. That was it. Clean. Organized. Nothing suspicious. This is what you called 911 about. I asked. Her mouth opened, then closed. She had nothing. The deputy shook his head slightly. I could tell he was already tired of the situation. And honestly, so was I, but it had to be handled by the book. I turned back to her. Ma'am, you are now officially being warned. Any further trespassing will result in arrest. Any more false reports will be treated as criminal. She still didn't get it. You can't do that. I'm trying to protect the community. You're not protecting anyone. I replied. You're harassing a legal property owner, wasting law enforcement time and ignoring the law. Then she made the mistake of stepping forward and jabbing her finger in my face. I'm not done with you, she hissed. That was it. Turn around. I said firmly, hands behind your back. She laughed at first. Actually laughed. You can't be serious. But when the cuffs clicked around her wrists, reality hit hard. Her whole body tensed. Wait! No, what are you doing? This is ridiculous. I didn't do anything wrong. You're being arrested for trespassing and misuse of emergency services. I told her. She fought it the whole way to the cruiser. Loud, dramatic, indignant. Like she couldn't believe someone like her could ever be arrested. Like the rules didn't apply to her. And through it all, I remained calm. I didn't gloat. I didn't taunt her. I just did my job. The deputy looked at me as I shut the door behind her and said, That was something else. I nodded. Let's get her booked. Then I'll write the report. And just like that, the woman who thought she was the enforcer of rules learned what happens when you push too far, in the wrong place, to the wrong person. Back at the station, she was still ranting. Not yelling anymore, but trying that tired routine, playing the victim. This is all just a misunderstanding, she kept saying. I didn't mean any harm. I was worried. I thought something shady was going on. She repeated it like a loop, hoping it would sound more convincing with each try. But no one was buying it. The paperwork was clear. The camera footage was clear. The 911 transcript was clear. She wasn't worried. She was furious that she couldn't control something, and she thought if she made enough noise, someone would finally listen to her. It's funny how people like her always seem to twist a story when they're on the other end of it. One minute, she was a self-proclaimed HOA enforcer, storming around with fake rules and printed out notices. The next, she was pretending like she was just a concerned citizen, completely innocent, shocked that anyone would treat her like a criminal. But the law doesn't care how loud you talk or how many HOA newsletters you've memorized. Fact are facts. She crossed a line, literally and legally. She made false accusations. She tried to use the system as a weapon, and it backfired. That's not something I take lightly. Because if someone like her gets away with it once, she'll do it again, and probably worse. After booking, we placed her in holding. Not for long, just enough to process everything. But it was enough to humble her a little. The outrage started to wear off. Her voice dropped. She stopped making demands. She even asked for water like a regular person, not like someone who thought she was above the rules. Meanwhile, word started spreading around town. Small towns work that way. Word travels fast, especially when it's something this juicy. Folks who had lived near her before started chiming in. Apparently, this wasn't her first incident. One neighbor said she filed complaints about their shed being too rustic. Another mentioned how she tried to ban chickens from someone's backyard, even though the area allowed it. She wasn't just difficult. She was a pattern, a walking, talking rule book with a superiority complex. And now that pattern had finally hit a wall it couldn't climb. The most surprising part, though, she had no idea who I was. Not really. Sure, she figured it out when she saw the badge, but before that, not a clue. She assumed I was just a rancher with no backing, no power, someone she could push around. She never bothered to ask, never looked into it, just decided I didn't belong and went to war over it. That mindset is dangerous. It's one thing to dislike your neighbor. It's another to build a story in your head so strong that you're willing to call the police over imaginary crimes. People forget that emergency lines aren't toys. Every minute an officer wastes chasing made-up nonsense is a minute someone else might be in real danger. And the sad truth? There are folks who get away with this sort of thing all the time. They manipulate systems, lie through their teeth, and rely on others not pushing back. But not here, not on my land, not in my county. After the arrest, I made sure everything was documented properly. The footage, the property records, the false claims, all of it went into file. I wanted it airtight, because cases like this tend to come with backlash. I knew she might try to twist the story later, spin it to the media, play the role of the innocent homeowner. But when you have facts, you don't need to shout. Later that week, I got a call from a lawyer. Hers, I assumed. The tone was polite, careful. They wanted to clear the air and find a solution that worked for everyone. I told them the only solution was respect. Respect for boundaries, respect for the law, and respect for people who don't need her approval to live peacefully. They didn't have much to say after that. I never set out to arrest a neighbor. I'm not the type to look for conflict. But when someone keeps poking the bear, they can't act surprised when it finally turns around. And in this case, the bear happened to have a badge and the full weight of the law behind it. It didn't take long for the fallout to begin. The day after her arrest, she was released on bail. As expected, the moment she walked out, she was back on her phone, probably updating her HOA group chat, posting half-truths online, trying to salvage her image. That's how people like her operate. When they lose control in real life, they try to win it back through drama and attention. But this time, the story wasn't on her side. She hadn't counted on the community, responding differently. See, this wasn't just about her little feud anymore. This was about the bigger picture, about neighbors watching her try to intimidate someone, call 911 for no reason, and then act like she was a victim when consequences showed up. It didn't look heroic. It looked petty, and most folks could see right through it. Some of her own HOA buddies stopped backing her. I heard from one man who said he'd been on the board with her for 2 months before quitting. She thinks she's a sheriff of the subdivision, he told me. Always nitpicking, always threatening to fine people. Now she finally messed with the wrong person. And she did, not because I was a sheriff, but because I wasn't afraid to stand up to her nonsense. The next few days were quiet around my property. No more signs. No more unexpected inspections. Just silence. I spent that time checking fences, feeding the horses, and catching up on the piece I hadn't realized I'd missed. Ranch life has a rhythm to it, and once you fall out of sync, it's hard to enjoy the work. But I was getting it back. Then a letter arrived, certified, from her lawyer. It was full of vague language and carefully chosen words, misunderstanding, miscommunication, no intent to harm. But hidden in all that was a request. She wanted to drop charges in exchange for a formal apology from me. Imagine that. After trespassing, after filing a false report, after being caught on camera, she still thought I owed her something. I didn't even need to think about it. I responded through the department. No apology. No deal. We were proceeding as planned. That letter was her last move in a game she'd already lost. Maybe she thought I'd blink. Maybe she thought my badge would make me go easy or sweep things under the rug. But the badge doesn't mean favoritism. It means fairness. It means doing what's right, even if it makes people uncomfortable. She started avoiding eye contact after that. If we passed each other on the road, she'd suddenly get real interested in her steering wheel. The HOA newsletter didn't mention her for a while. Rumor was she'd been asked to take a break from leadership duties. No surprise there. But what struck me most was how many people reached out after the fact. Ranchers, homeowners, deputies from other counties. People who had dealt with the same kind of behavior, but had stayed silent. One guy told me his neighbor had called animal control 3 times in 1 month, just because his dog barked at squirrels. Another woman said her HOA had fined her for planting a tomato garden in her front yard. It's everywhere. This need to control, to micromanage, to invent problems where none exist. And most people just roll over because it's easier. But when someone finally says enough, it shakes the whole tree. I didn't plan to be the guy who said enough. But once it started, I knew I couldn't let it slide. Because the truth is, if you give people like her an inch, they'll take the whole road, put up a fence, and write a rule saying no one else can drive on it. She thought calling 911 would scare me. She thought she could humiliate me in my own home, on my own land. But what she didn't know, what she never even bothered to consider, was that she wasn't just challenging a neighbor. She was challenging the law. And she lost. The season started to change not long after all that settled. The trees turned gold. The mornings got colder, and the air finally felt still again. The ranch returned to its natural rhythm. Early feedings, fence checks, trail rides, and quiet evenings watching the sun disappear behind the hills. For a while, it felt like nothing had ever happened. But around here, peace always comes with a story behind it. I kept to myself like I always had. Didn't bring it up, didn't spread gossip, didn't need to. The folks who needed to know already knew. And the ones who didn't, they weren't missing much. But every now and then, I get a visitor pulling into gravel drive, windows down, arm resting on the door. "Hey," they'd say, "you're the guy who arrested the HOA lady, right?" I'd smile, something like that. People weren't coming to celebrate. They were coming to talk. To say, "I've got one of those neighbors too." Or, "She's the reason I built my fence 10 feet higher." It wasn't about her anymore. It was about the type, the oversteppers, the self-appointed rule makers, the ones who confuse community with control. Everyone had a story. Mine just happened to be the one that hit the headlines. Funny thing is, I never hated her. Still don't. Hate is heavy, and I got work to do. Horses don't feed themselves. But what she did, that stuck with me. Not the yelling or the trespassing, or even the fake reports. It was the way she felt entitled to power she never earned. The belief that just by speaking loud enough or printing enough rules, she could make the world bend to her liking. That's what got under my skin. Because in a place like this, respect matters. We don't need cameras on every corner or newsletters stuffed with bylaws. We just need folks to look each other in the eye and mean what they say. You shake hands, you keep your word, and you stay on your side of the fence. Simple as that. But she never saw it that way. To her, Everything was a contest. Every fence was too tall, every barn too close, every dog too loud. She wasn't building community. She was managing a kingdom in her mind, where everyone else was just living on her turf. That's the danger of letting a little power go unchecked. Give the wrong person a clipboard and a title, and suddenly they think they're running the world. And if no one pushes back, it only gets worse. A few weeks later, I heard she put her house up for sale. No announcement, no grand farewell, just a quiet listing online. I drove past one day and saw the sign in the yard, half leaning in the wind. No one was mowing the grass. No car in the driveway. Just silence. For the first time since she moved in, it looked like the land was finally breathing again. Some folks asked if I felt like I won, if I got the last word. But that's not how I see it. I didn't set out to win anything. I just wanted to be left alone. I wanted to live my life, take care of my animals, and enjoy the home I worked hard to build. That shouldn't be too much to ask. But sometimes, people like her make it their mission to turn simple living into a battleground. And when they do, you've got two choices, roll over or stand up. I stood up, not with anger, not with revenge, just with truth, with calm, with patience. And when the time came, with handcuffs. That part of the story might be over, but the lesson's still fresh. Out here, peace doesn't mean keeping quiet when someone crosses a line. It means drawing that line with clarity and making sure it stands firm, whether it's your gate, your land, or your name. If you don't defend it, someone else will claim it. And when they do, you better hope it's not a sheriff they're messing with. Because out here, justice doesn't knock. It walks right through the front gate. A few months passed, and winter came in slow and heavy. Frost on the fence posts, breath in the air, long nights by the fire. Everything felt quieter. No more knocks at the door. No surprise compliance checks. Just the sound of the wind moving through the trees, the horses shifting in their stalls, and the steady hum of life getting back to normal. The for sale sign finally came down. Word around town was she'd moved a few counties over to a gated community. Something with strict landscaping codes and an actual HOA president with a clipboard and a golf cart. Probably more her style. Somewhere she could write reports all day without anyone calling her out. And honestly, good for her. Maybe that's where she belonged all along. But around here, her name still came up from time to time, usually in a chuckle or a lesson. Don't go full Karen, someone might say when a neighbor starts asking too many questions. People remembered, not because she was powerful, but because she got put in her place in front of everyone, by someone who didn't back down. And in small towns like ours, that kind of story sticks. Not because it was dramatic, but because it felt fair. I didn't make a big deal out of it, didn't parade around. But I won't lie, there were moments where I felt the weight of what it meant. Because when someone finally draws a line, people start rethinking their own. One neighbor started to let his kids ride bikes on the dirt trail again. Said he didn't feel like he had to watch his back anymore. Another guy rebuilt the shed he'd taken down just to avoid her complaints. Even the mailman stopped avoiding my driveway. Little changes, but meaningful. It was like the town had exhaled. And with her gone, something else started happening. People started talking to each other again, not just about each other. I got more waves from passing trucks, more folks stopping by to check on things, to ask how the ranch was doing, or to say thanks. Not for the arrest, but for standing firm when it counted. Somewhere along the line, the ranch became more than just my property. It became a reminder that boundaries are worth keeping, and not just the physical ones. The ones you hold for your peace, your time, your dignity. That winter, I took the time to rebuild the front gate. Not because it was broken, but because it deserved to look the way it was meant to, strong, solid, and unbothered. I even added a sign. Nothing flashy, just 2 words burned into wood. Private land. A quiet message, but a clear one. One morning, not long after the sign went up, a car pulled into the drive. Not a flashy car, just an old pickup with a dented bumper and a bed full of wood. The guy who stepped out looked about my age, maybe a few years younger, wore a hat pulled low and had that tired look in his eyes. The kind people get after dealing with too much noise and too little respect. He introduced himself. Said he'd just bought a place down the road. Ranch property, fixer-upper. Had heard a bit about the situation and figured I'd be a good man to talk to. "You the sheriff?" he asked. I nodded. He looked around at the land, the barn, the horses grazing out back. Then he said, "Heard you had to deal with a real piece of work." I chuckled. She kept me busy. He didn't laugh right away, just nodded slow and said, "Good. Someone had to." We talked a bit, swapped some stories. He asked about fencing, feed, water lines. The kind of stuff neighbors should be talking about. By the time he left, I knew one thing for sure. He wasn't here to write anyone up. He was here to build something, just like I had. That's the kind of energy this place needed again. And every time I walked that stretch of land where she once stood waving her phone, shouting orders, trying to claim control that was never hers to begin with, I think about how far things have come, how fast people forget when someone finally leaves, and how much peace one arrest really brought. The days kept rolling on, and before long spring crept back into the valley. The snow melted, grass turned green again, and the land came alive. Calves were born, birds returned. The ranch buzzed with that familiar energy that only comes once winter finally gives up. Life, in all its noisy, dusty glory, had fully returned. With it came a steady rhythm. Early mornings, long days, peaceful nights. I was back to fixing fence posts, hauling hay, and watching the land do what it's always done, provide. But something had shifted in the air, something subtle. I wasn't looking over my shoulder anymore. I wasn't bracing for another bogus complaint or another stranger with a clipboard pretending to have authority. It was just quiet in the best possible way. But then one afternoon I got a knock at the door. A deputy from a nearby county. Someone I'd worked with a few times before. He wasn't in uniform, just jeans and boots. Same as me, he'd been passing through and wanted to talk. Said he had a question. Off the record, he pulled up a chair on the porch and got right to it. "You remember that HOA lady you arrested?" he asked. I nodded. Hard to forget. He scratched his chin and said, "Well, you're not the only one she tangled with. She's causing noise in her new town, too. Only this time, she's trying to sue the HOA for harassment." I raised an eyebrow. "Harassment?" "Yeah," he said. "Apparently, she's claiming emotional distress because no one on the new board listens to her ideas. Says they're discriminating against her. Try to call in a noise complaint on a 4th of July barbecue in January." That sounded about right. He leaned back and shook his head. "She's got lawyers sending letters, demanding meetings, threatening to go to media. But the new board, they're not backing down." I had to admit, it brought a bit of a smirk to my face. She hadn't changed, not even a little. She just moved her performance to a new stage, with a new audience, hoping this time someone would clap. "You planning to get involved?" I asked. He shook his head. "Nope. Just thought you want to know you're not the only one who saw through her act." I did. It was nice to be reminded that truth has a way of catching up. After he left, I went out to the pasture to check on the horses. The sun was low, casting that golden light across the hills. As I leaned on the fence and watched the herd move, I found myself thinking about her. Not with anger, but with clarity. People like her don't show up with warning signs. They come dressed as neighbors, concerned citizens, just trying to help. They smile while they slowly take control. And by the time most folks realize what's happening, they're already buried under rules they never agreed to. But every now and then, someone pushes back. Someone stands their ground, not with shouting or pettiness, but with calm, steady truth. That's what this land taught me. To be still, to be firm, to let the noise pass like wind through the trees, while I focus on what matters. Fences, family, freedom. A few days later, a family from a few miles down stopped by with a homemade pie and a folded note. Inside was a simple message. "Thank you for standing up when it wasn't easy. It made the rest of us a little braver." I didn't need thanks, but I kept the note anyway, because whether people say it or not, actions ripple. When you hold the line, Even once, it gives others permission to hold theirs. That's how small towns stay strong. Not because they're perfect, but because someone at the right time decides not to let fear win. And out here, fear comes in strange forms. Not always fists or weapons. Sometimes it shows up in polite voices and printed rules, in committee meetings and concerned neighbor emails. But it's all the same thing, a slow erosion of peace. That's why you gotta guard it, not with anger, but with clarity, and sometimes a badge.